Earlier today, I was watching on YouTube your recent induction into the Namtech Hall of Fame.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that must
Yep.
be that must have been a really special experience for you.
Well, it was the thing that made it special is because it was all my buddies,
Yeah.
were there. Jackson and boys from the section, and Steve Lukather inducted us in. He's one of my best friends. So it was all a family affair, kind of.
Yeah, I
So
saw you.
yes, it was.
I saw in your speech referred to them as your brothers. So there must have been a real sense of brotherhood amongst you during those golden years.
Absolutely. There's no other way to describe it. It's totally a brotherhood.
Yeah. Just looking back, do you remember your first guitar?
First guitar was probably a Guild jazz box. From this is like we're talking early '60s.
Yeah.
My very first guitar was a Stella because I started taking lessons when I was 10 years old, and that was a cheap Stella that my mother bought for me. And then when I got good enough, they got me a Guild. I don't know what the brand name was, but it's like a jazz guitar, big fat cutaway jazz guitar. So that was my first guitar. But I immediately got rid of that to get something more rock and roll, which ended up being a Telecaster. So I went to Telecasters.
So there was a musical influence in your family at all?
Yes. It's kind of skipped a generation. My mother's family were all very, very fine musicians, really fine musicians. They were all they immigrated from Russia, from Moscow, and my mother's father and his two brothers were all very well known and very highly respected violin and viola players. And when they moved to New York, they had they played under Toscanini in the NBC Symphony Orchestra, which was the best gig you could possibly have as a violinist. So they were really high, better than me, way the hell better than me. They're real high-end, great musicians. But then my mother and father, neither of them were particularly musical. So
now,
I guess it skipped a generation.
An early band of yours was the King Bees. Tell us about that band.
All right. Okay, the King Bees was my first band, and right after I graduated high school, instead of going to college, I wanted to start a rock and roll band, because that's what happened. So the Beatles had come out in 1963. I graduated in 1964, and at that point, as soon as I saw them and heard them, I knew, my path. I knew what my path was going to be. So that's the path I followed. Mm-hmm.
Now, one of your school day friends was James Taylor. You knew James from a young age. Do you remember your first meeting with him? And was there a particular point along the way where it became obvious to you that the talent within?
Yeah. When I met James, we were both about 13 or 14. And both of our parents took us up to Martha's Vineyard every summer. Now, at the time, this is a million years ago, so at the time, Martha's Vineyard was very affordable. And unlike now, when it's completely unaffordable by anybody. And we met just hanging out on the porch of the local grocery store down there, and we just started hanging out together, and we hitchhiked around together, and we just became pals, And after a few days of hanging out, we were hitchhiking someplace, and he started to sing. And I'll never forget it because he started to sing Ray Charles's "Hallelujah, I Love Her So." Mm-hmm. And I was real familiar with. At that point, I was real familiar with Ray Charles, and with blues and soul music and R&B. I was really into it. So as soon as I heard him sing, I'm like, "Oh my God, this guy can sing!" He's the only person I'd ever met that could sing. That could really sing. And so I was very impressed. And at that point, we started playing music together, and we hung out every summer, and we became very close friends, and we still are.
Now, you were together in the Flying Machine, which didn't really take off to be successful. Can you pinpoint any particular thing that was a stumbling block in the way of that band going ahead?
Yeah, sure. There was a couple of things, but one of them was, back in those days, there were no stage monitors, like those wedges you see on stage now and in-ear monitors. There was none of that. So James was playing electric guitar. There was only two speakers above the stage aimed at the audience. So he couldn't hear himself, and he had to sing way louder and harder than was appropriate for him, and it was too much. So I think that was a turning point for him when he realized that being in a rock and roll band and having to play loud was not going to be the right path for him. And I realized that too. Same time, we did have a lot of fun together, and we putting that band together, and we played. We played continuously. We played all the time. We played at a place called the Night Owl Cafe, which is where the Loving Spoonful had gotten discovered out of the Night Owl Cafe. So everyone wanted to play there. And they would have auditions every week, 2 or 3 days a week. Bands would come in from Long Island or from New Jersey, from all over, to get a gig at the Night Owl. But we held on to that gig for a year. Nobody could knock us out of the box because we were really good. And so, we got a lot of pleasure out of that. We got, James, I think, had a real hard time, but and one of the things that came out of it was he realized that he's better off as a solo artist accompanying himself on acoustic guitar, which is, of course, what he's a genius at.
Yes, of course. You did record with the Flying Machine, but those sessions didn't see the light of day until after James's solo career had taken off. Was it disappointing to you that it took James' solo success for those recordings to finally come out?
Yeah, it was very disappointing for us. We got in the studio basically one day, maybe it was a 3-hour session or something like that. The guys that had signed us, Chip Taylor and Al Gorgoni, had signed us, and I'm not sure if they believed in us or not, but they didn't spend any money on the album. And there was one single that came out that went nowhere. And then after James became famous, they stuck an album out called The Flying Machine, which we had no say in, nothing. Suddenly, there it was. The first time I saw it was in a store, and I never got paid any money for it, neither did James. And we were not happy about the album being released because we had no control over it.
Yeah.
It wasn't very good. It wasn't a good album. It wasn't worth the money they were charging for it, and we were pissed off, and we're still pissed off, to be honest with you.
You also...
not about the money, but about the idea that, we had no control over our own material and our own music. We were ripped off.
Yeah.
But that's the way the music business was back then, and probably still is now.
That's right, and yeah, I'm sure there's many stories like that one.
Oh yeah.
You also had a brief period in the Fugs, which I wasn't aware of. What do you call it that time?
Well, after the Flying Machine broke up, I needed a gig, and we were all in Greenwich Village all the time, and the Fugs were playing around the corner, and it came to my attention they needed a guitar player. And the Fugs were basically a concept rather than a real rock and roll band. None of them could play. None of them could sing, really. They were poets. They were Lower East Side poets. But they had this concept. Everyone, and you got to remember, back then, everyone wanted to be in a rock and roll band. All the folkies, all the poets, all the playwrights, everyone wanted to be in a rock and roll band. And because that was the happening currency of the day, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah.
And so I did a gig. It was fun. Ed Sanders, the leader of the Fugs, was a very, very bright guy, and I learned a lot from him. And we had fun. But it was not what I consider a musical gig. There's no way, shape, or form that was going to be my, that was just a short, brief stop on the way,
So, what were your ambitions back in those early days? And did becoming a successful session player, was that in your thoughts at all?
Well, becoming a successful session player wasn't really it. My idea of a session player was like the Funk Brothers from Motown, or the Stax Volt Band, or the Muscle Shook Band, where everybody got together, everybody knew each other, and everybody got together and cut records all day long. Same cats.
Yeah.
Just to go out and play odd dates was not my ambition. No. And to play movie scores, TV scores, no, I didn't care about that. I wasn't interested in that at all. I wanted to be in a band that made great music day in and day out. And my heroes were Steve Cropper, Booker T and the MGs, the Funk Brothers from Detroit, the Swamp Boys from down there in Muscle Shoals. Those guys were my heroes. Not because they did a lot of sessions, but because every session they did was spectacular.
Yeah.
And meant something.
Have you ever pondered how your life and career may have panned out had you not moved and settled in Los Angeles?
No. I'd rather not ponder the imponderable, nor would I rather, change history. It worked out the way it did because it was supposed to.
Yeah.
And I don't regret any of it. It worked out the way it was supposed to work out.
Yeah, it was meant to be.
I guess.
Yeah. You're also in a band called The City with Carole King. You put out an excellent album, but again, like the Flying Machine, it didn't really take off despite the obvious talents within the band. What's your theory on why that one didn't fly as it deserved to?
I have no idea. I thought it was a terrific album, great album. Lou Adler produced, and we had a ball to make. That was the first full album that I ever played on.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible experience for me, just an incredible experience. I thought it was going to go huge, but it didn't. Why? Who knows why? This is pop music. Who the hell knows? It's a crapshoot. Anything you do is a crapshoot. So it didn't take off. There wasn't one hit single that would have launched the whole thing. And who knows why? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, of course, one album involving Carole King that certainly did fly was Tapestry, and of course you played on that. What are your memories of those sessions, and do you recall feeling at the time that you were working on something extremely special?
All right. Well, by that time, that was Carole's third album. The first one was The City, as you said. The second one was an album called Writer, Carole King.
Yep.
And the third one was Tapestry. Now, I thought the first two were genius. I knew Carole was a genius. I was terribly impressed with her. I absolutely loved her. She taught me so much. I can't even begin to describe how much I learned from playing with her, playing on her demos, playing in The City, and doing all the work she did. She believed in me, which, thank God she did, because what a blessing. And it's a debt I could never repay. And I learned so much from her. Working with her is like going to Harvard or Princeton or something in terms of learning how to play the guitar on records. That's what she taught me. How to play parts that'll help a song and that'll be great on a record. And I learned that from her. She's a total genius, Carole, a musical genius without any question, and one of the most important people in my life.
Now, you mentioned earlier how the Flying Machine experience taught you that James Taylor was probably better suited to being in a solo situation. Was there something about Carole's personality too that saw her better suited to being a solo act rather than a part of a band?
Well, I think she wanted to be in a band originally with The City because she just didn't have the confidence to go out there and be Carole King artist by herself. And she had stage fright. She didn't want to get on stage. And she was fearful. And the way she finally did get on stage, as I'm sure you know, had to do with James involving her in his live show and then introducing her to the audience and saying, "Oh, this is Carole King. She's going to sing a couple of tunes for you." And that was a great way in for her. And then she realized she could do it by virtue of having a very safe atmosphere in which to present herself in James's show. And the audience, of course, responded brilliantly. They suddenly understood this is the woman that wrote all those great songs. Oh, my God. And at that point, she had enough confidence to go out and be an artist. And thank God.
You played behind a lot of singer-songwriter types over the years. What for you is the key factor in successfully backing those types of artists? Is it being aware of letting the song stand on their own merits and not get in the way of the lyric?
Everything you do has to help the song, help the record, help. You have to play something that's going to help, that's going to light everyone up, and that's not going to get in the way of the song. That's going to help the song, but not distract from the song. And like I said, most of this I learned from Carole, but I had a natural instinct for that anyway, having listened to Stax Volt and Motown records since I was a little kid. And, I learned and gleaned a lot of information from just by listening and also by having these brilliant people, including Lou Adler and Peter Asher, being taught and helped by all those people who really knew more than I did. And the idea is to light the singer up, light the song up, light the drummer up, make the whole thing better. And that comes from playing a simple part, not a look at me, look at me, look at me part. A simple, easy part that helps. And that's what I was always there to do. Play something that's going to help.
Was it ever a concern or a fear for you as a musician that you may get typecast playing behind these singer-songwriter types? We've all heard the term Melo Mafia, which I'm sure you probably have heard so many times over the years. Did that sit comfortably with you?
No. I hated that nomenclature. I really hated that sobriquet of the mellow. There was nothing mellow about any of us, believe me. We didn't live a mellow lifestyle. James Taylor's song Fire and Rain is about suicide and drug addiction. I don't see where there's anything mellow about it, except that it wasn't loud. But what he was saying had depth and emotion and was not in any way to be taken mellow. John Denver, maybe he's mellow. Or Dan Fogelberg, maybe he's mellow. But James Taylor ain't fucking mellow, and neither were we. I came up playing. Let me tell you something. I came up playing rock and roll. Okay, I started when I was 18 years old. I played every dump up and down the East Coast, every dive bar, every alcoholic bar, every gay bar, every dumps for years. Then I moved to LA and played every dump up and down the LA coast. Teenage nightclubs, again, biker bars, gay bars, alcoholic bars. So I did not appreciate being called mellow, at all. And I as a person am not mellow. No one who knows me would ever describe me as mellow. And the stuff I played on these records was designed to help the song and help the point of view. You can't just bash away when you have a great song.
Absolutely.
And so, I never appreciated that thing. And of course, nobody knew that there were singer-songwriters. That term didn't come out till 10 years later. Nobody called anyone singer-songwriters. That was an expression made up by critics. The Melo Mafia was an expression made up by critics.
Critics, yeah.
And they never gave us a break because we weren't loud, and we weren't like the Trogs, or we weren't loud enough, we weren't disgusting enough, or we weren't something enough. We got to remember, back in those days, rock critics ruled, and they had bigger egos than anyone in the music business, and they could make or break you theoretically by a review in Rolling Stone or something like that. But it all turned out to be bullshit, didn't it? I'm still here, and nobody reads Rolling Stone, or do they?
No, actually, a Rolling Stone here in Australia has just folded.
Nobody gives a shit about any rock critics or anything anyone says about it. It's all word of mouth, and it all has to do with that. Also, having done this for over 50 years, my credentials are solid, and I feel nothing, no guilt, and no shame, and no disappointment, and nothing. I've paid my dues. I earned whatever I have, and anyone that doesn't think so can go fuck themselves.
And what always thought differed you guys from the other players, such as the Wrecking Crew, and that is you took it on the road too. I mean, you toured extensively as well as doing all those wonderful studio sessions, and that must be that's a huge part of your success and what made that band so great.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Playing live was really made us solid. When I say us, I mean Russ Kunkel, Elise Sklar, and myself especially.
Yeah,
we've been playing together for 50 years. And we got to a point where we had telepathy going, mental telepathy going. We didn't need to speak. We didn't need to say anything. We knew what to do.
Yep.
And that only comes from playing a lot.
Did you find over the years in the studio you developed a good ear for what was going to be a hit and what wasn't?
No, that was never my expertise. There's lots of people that knew better than I did. What was going to be what was going to be a hit. For instance, by the time Tapestry came out, Lou Adler, who produced it, he understood. As a matter of fact, he said this is going to be the love story of albums. The Love Story was a huge movie right then in the 70s, and it was a huge hit that everyone wanted to see. And he saw it. I didn't, because I'd already made 2 albums with Carol that I thought were great and went nowhere. So I didn't see where Tapestry was going to do any better than these. I'd hoped it would. I knew she was great. I knew she was genius, but I didn't trust the public to understand, since they hadn't gotten the last 2.
Talk about your own songwriting. Having worked extensively with such wonderful songwriters yourself, how profound of an effect has that had on your own individual songwriting?
Well, to be surrounded by like these geniuses all the time has had a profound effect on me. When you hang out and spend a lot of time, years and years with James Taylor, Jackson Browne, Don Henley, it becomes after a while it rubs off on you. What excellence is rubs off on you, and you realize how good these guys are, and then you realize how high you have to shoot. Also, what I realized is that I had to do something different than what Jackson, for instance, and James were doing. They had tremendously insightful tunes that had social resonance and had tremendous romantic resonance, and they were brilliant. So my tunes are a little more kind of sarcastic, a little more left of center than their tunes, and a little more beat oriented than them fellers. Because I wasn't a folky, and I wasn't a singer-songwriter with an acoustic guitar. I was a rock and roller.
You mentioned Jackson Browne, and one album of his you did appear on was Running on Empty. Such an ambitious concept for a live album. You had some wonderful songs to work with there, but the format of the album was very different to most live albums. Were you confident that the concept would work?
I didn't know. All I knew was I was thrilled to be there, because we were there with the group I was in at the time, The Section, which was basically we had backed up James on tours, and Jackson had hired us to come out and do this Running on Empty, a live album, all recorded live, backstage, on stage, hotel rooms, everywhere. And this is typical of Jackson, who is a fearless fellow and a guy with, this is where his ambition lay, was to make an album on the road that was an authentic album about the road, recorded on the road, and playing all original material at our live shows. In other words, Running on Empty, no one had ever heard it before. And yet they cheered and yelled and screamed and loved it. They loved it as soon as they heard it. And that was a hell of a thing.
You've done a good share of production work over the years as well. How much of an advantage have you found in the studio producing other musicians, having been a musician yourself, rather than opposed to a producer that's not a musician?
Well, the whole thing has to do with putting the right people together at the right time. Better producers than I can hear a hit before it's a hit. They go, listen to a song and go, that's a hit. I've rarely been able to do that. Although there has been times where I have called hits, but that is not my area of expertise. My taste does not run towards, what's necessarily popular at the time. There are many people better at it than me, and always have been, because I have very personal tastes about what I love. It's not necessarily what is, top 40, top 10, whatever. But I was lucky in that I did have some hits with some brilliant people.
One being Don Henley. You must be extremely proud of the work you did with Don in the studio. Tell us about how you approached the task of working with him.
Well, with Henley, when I first connected with him, he realized he had to make a solo album. The Eagles were defunct at that point, and Glenn Frey had already made a solo album, which I played on actually. And so he started calling everyone in LA to come up to his pad and jam with him and see who had the best ideas and we could go forward with. And after a while, I got a call from Don, and I went up there, and 3 hours later he says, "Oh, so you want to co-produce and co-write this album with me?" Yep. Because Don's one of the badass cats at that time, one of the best singers and writers any of us knew. And so that was an incredible break for me. But I did have a lot of ideas, so he was right to hire me.
So, what for you provides more personal satisfaction? A memorable recording session which you've worked on and thoroughly put together, or the immediacy of a great live gig?
I would say the immediacy of a great live gig.
Yeah.
But the best, the most fun I had making albums, recording, was with Henley, because he was very into experimentation. There was no budget. There was no budget constraints. It wasn't like, we can't do this, we can't do that. And so we had a lot of freedom, and Henley was open to a lot of ideas. He trusted me at the time. And so that was probably my most rewarding recording experience.
And what's keeping you busy these days, Danny?
Say again, I'm sorry.
What's keeping you busy these days, work-wise?
My own album. I just finished making a solo album myself.
Fantastic.
this point, I'm kind of an artist, and I'm representing my own material. And we made an album for a Japanese label, which will also come out here, come out all over the world. And I made this album with my dear brothers, Russ Kunkel, Lee Sklar, Waddy Wachtel. They worked on this album with me. And then we also had guest artists on it. Jackson sang on one tune, James sang and played on one tune, Mike McDonald sang on one tune, David Crosby sang on one tune.
Oh.
And so everybody came to the party, and it was that this has been probably the most rewarding experience that I can remember since working with Henley in the 80s. So this is incredibly rewarding. And we're going to tour. We're going to Japan in June. We're going to tour there. We're going to tour here in the States. Same band. Russ, Lee, Waddy, myself. So this is like a dream come true for me, because these are my favorite people in the world, my favorite humans in the world, the best musicians you would ever find anywhere. And it's an incredible thing to be happening at this point in my career.
That sounds absolutely awesome. It's all new material, all your own songs?
All right, so the album is going to have 8 songs that have already been recorded, done differently, though. Songs I wrote with James, Henley, and Jackson. And then there's 4 new tunes on there that I wrote myself that haven't been recorded by famous people.
That's absolutely brilliant. Much to look forward to there. What's the projected release date for that?
Oh, it's going to come out in the spring in Japan, and we're just making deals now for an American release. I'm not sure when that'll be. Probably in the summer. And we're going to do gigs here in the States. We're going to go to Japan and tour there in June, and then we're going to start touring here, Europe, everywhere. Everyone's really into it, and I can't believe how lucky I am and how blessed I am to be able to involve these, Russ, Lee, and Waddy. These are my best friends and the people I love most in the world. So to have them so involved and so committed to this is an absolute blessing. It's just an incredible blessing.
Oh, thoroughly look forward to that. I hope Australia ends up on your tour schedule there at some point. We'd love to see it.
I hope so too. And listen for it. That album. This is. I guess it's the thing I'm the most proud of, which is astonishing to have that happen at this point in my life and my career. But this is the manifestation that I'm the most proud of. Is this album.
Brilliant. Danny, thanks so much for your time. It's been an absolute honour to speak with you, and thank you for your contribution to some of the most important music of our generation. And obviously, there's so much more to come, and it's great to speak to someone who's still full of passion for what they do.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you down there, down under.
We'll be here waiting. We'll be here waiting for you. That'd be great.
Great. Thanks very much.
All the best, Danny. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.